The doctors couldn't wake the billionaire for 10 years. My daughter did something in under 4 minutes that made the head of neurology call security on an 11-year-old. At 4:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, my phone buzzed while I was mopping the East Corridor. I remember the exact time because everything after that split my life into before and after. They have Sophia, admin office. Come now. I dropped the mop so hard it cracked against the tile. I didn't shut off the floor buffer, didn't sign out, didn't think. I just ran through 2 corridors, past the elevators I didn't have time to wait for, up the stairs 2 at a time in rubber soles still slick with bleach. By the time I reached the 7th floor, my chest felt like it was tearing open. My daughter was sitting outside Dr. Hargrove's office. Small plastic chair, feet not touching the ground, mud caked into her hands, her sleeves, the front of her jacket. 2 uniformed security guards stood on either side of her, like she was a threat. She weighed maybe 70 pounds. She had just walked into a restricted room, stood next to a man who hadn't moved in a decade, and done something no one in that building, no specialist, no machine, no $1 million treatment had managed to do. When I stepped closer, she looked up at me. Her eyes were steady. "Not scared, Dad," she said quietly. Like nothing was wrong. His hand moved. Behind that door sat a man worth billions. And somehow, my kid had reached him. "My name is Daniel Reyes. I started working the night shift at Whitmore Memorial Medical Center in 2015, a year after my wife died. 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning. Cleaning floors most people never notice. Wiping down surfaces no one remembers touching. Moving through hallways that never really sleep. Whitmore wasn't just a hospital. It was a name people recognized. Money lived in that building, old money. Quiet money. The kind that builds entire wings and puts its name on the front in polished steel letters. Leonard Whitmore was the reason half that place existed. His father funded the East Wing back in the 80s. Leonard himself donated over $14 million to build the Neurology Pavilion in 2007. When he collapsed during a board meeting in 2012, massive cerebral hemorrhage, they didn't move him somewhere else. They kept him there. Room 701, private wing, not just private isolated. Separate ventilation system, dedicated nursing staff, keycard access that most people, including me, were never supposed to have. I only got temporary access one night because a pipe burst on the 7th floor. 3 in the morning. Maintenance short-staffed, water pooling under the doors. My supervisor handed me a card and said, "Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. Don't look inside." I didn't. Not at first, but when you clean the same hallway long enough, the glass stops being invisible. You start to notice things. The soft green glow of monitors, the steady mechanical rhythm of a ventilator. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels heavy. Like something is waiting. Leonard Whitmore lay in that room like a man carved out of wax, perfectly still, skin pale under controlled lighting. A body that used to run a multi-billion-dollar empire reduced to numbers on a screen. 10 years. That's how long he'd been like that. Everyone knew the story. You couldn't work there and not hear it. Specialists flown in from everywhere, Johns Hopkins, Zurich. Places I'd only ever seen on TV. Experimental treatments that cost more per dose than I made in a year. Nothing worked. EEGs showed almost nothing. MRIs showed his brain slowly shrinking. Dr. Victor Hargrove, head of neurology. Published, respected, untouchable, had already recommended to the family that they start adjusting expectations. That's the polite way of saying he's not coming back. But Leonard's brother, Gerald Whitmore, never agreed. Gerald controlled the estate. Gerald signed the checks. And from what I overheard in quiet conversations and half-finished sentences in break rooms, Gerald had his own reasons for wanting his brother exactly where he was. Alive, unconscious, unable to change anything. I didn't understand the full picture back then. I wasn't part of that world. I cleaned around it, moved through it like a shadow. All I knew was this. A man worth billions lay trapped in a room most people couldn't even enter. And whatever was keeping him there was bigger than medicine. By the spring of 2022, it was just me and Sophia. No backup plan. No family nearby. No one to call when things went wrong. After my wife died, everything became numbers: rent, groceries, gas, school supplies. I worked nights because it paid a little more. Slept in pieces, ate standing up most days, did whatever it took to keep things moving. Childcare wasn't an option most weeks, so sometimes Sophia came with me. I'm not proud of that. A hospital isn't a place for a kid, I knew that. But, when you're choosing between leaving your daughter alone or bringing her somewhere, you can at least see her on your breaks. You stop pretending there are perfect decisions. Sophia made it easier. She was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from fear, the kind that comes from watching, noticing. She did her homework in the break room on the second floor. Headphones in, legs tucked under the chair like she was trying to take up less space. The staff liked her. Nurses would leave juice boxes in the fridge with her name on them. One of the radiology techs showed her card tricks. People softened around her in a way they didn't around me. She knew the rules. Which hallways were fine, which ones weren't. And one rule I made her repeat, back to me more times than I can count: 7th floor is off limits. Always. She promised. But Sophia noticed things. She noticed when one of the janitors walked with a limp and asked if his knee was okay. Not in a loud, attention-seeking way, just quiet, direct, like it mattered. She noticed when a vending machine kept short-changing people and told someone until it got fixed. She noticed a patient who never had visitors and left a drawing under the door without telling anyone. And she noticed room 701 about a month before everything happened. She mentioned it. "Dad, there's a man upstairs who never moves." My stomach dropped the second she said it. "What were you doing up there?" "I wasn't," she said quickly. "I saw him through the stairwell window." I remember exhaling. Slow. Trying to keep my voice steady. "He's sick." "Soft. Really sick," she nodded. But she didn't look convinced. "He doesn't look sick," she said. "He looks stuck." That word stayed with me. Stuck. I brushed it off at the time. Kids say things, they don't always understand what they're seeing. But Sophia wasn't guessing. She was paying attention, and when she paid attention to something, she didn't let it go. April 19th, 2022. The storm hit hard that afternoon. The kind of rain that turns parking lots into shallow rivers and coats everything in mud. Sophia got dropped off at the hospital soaked. Dirt splashed up her legs from cutting across the back lot. My shift hadn't started yet. The sitter never showed. A nurse was supposed to watch her, but a code blue pulled her away. In those 20 minutes, everything lined up. A faulty stairwell door, an empty corridor, room 701 left slightly open. Sophia walked in. She stood by Leonard Whitmore, talked to him, then reached into her jacket, pulled out a handful of wet earth and gently spread it across his face. 17 seconds after she touched him, everything broke. The nurse came back, froze in the doorway, then screamed sharp, panicked, the kind that brings people running. Security rushed in. They didn't ask questions. They grabbed Sophia, pulled her off the chair, dragged her out like she'd done something dangerous. She didn't fight, didn't cry. She just said one thing. Quiet but clear: "Look at his hand." No one looked. The nurse wiped the mud off his face, checked his vitals, reset the room back to what it was supposed to be: stable, controlled, unchanged. Except it wasn't. Because in the chart buried at the bottom of a routine note, she wrote a single line she almost didn't keep: involuntary flexion observed in left hand. Duration approximately 2-3 seconds. For the first time in 10 years, Leonard Whitmore moved. And they were already trying to pretend he didn't. What happened in that office was the moment I understood exactly how power works. Not loudly, not violently. Quietly. Cleanly. Like it had done this before. When I walked in, Dr. Hargrove didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stood behind his desk, hands resting flat on the surface. Posture perfect. Beside him was Sheila Voss from Risk Management, sharp eyes, legal mind, already 3 steps ahead of anything I was about to say. They weren't panicking. They were organizing. "This is a biosecurity breach," Hargrove said, like he was reading from a script already written. "An unauthorized individual introduced a contaminated, organic substance to a high-risk patient. Do you understand the liability here?" He didn't look at me like a father. He looked at me like a problem. "My daughter is 11, I said. My voice came out lower than I expected. "And one of your guards left a bruise on her arm." That got a pause. Not concern, just recalculation. "She entered a restricted medical area," Sheila said calmly. Security responded appropriately. Appropriately. I felt my jaw tighten. But I didn't move. I knew better. One wrong move, one raised voice, and I'd be exactly what they needed me to be: uncontrolled, unreliable, disposable. She said. His hand moved. I said, Silence. It stretched just long enough to feel intentional. Dr. Hargrove picked up his phone and paged the nurse. Patricia Langford walked in less than a minute later. She didn't look at me, didn't look at Sophia. Her eyes flicked once quick to Sheila, then to Hargrove. "Did you observe any change in patient condition?" he asked. "A beat, just one. I may have seen a minor involuntary reflex," she said carefully. "Likely a spinal automatism. Not clinically significant, not clinically significant." Hargrove nodded. Satisfied, like a box had just been checked, he turned back to me. "Mr. Reyes, your daughter contaminated a vulnerable patient. We will not be pressing charges at this time." "At this time," I repeated. "But this incident will be reviewed. Your employment is under evaluation, effective immediately. Your daughter is no longer permitted on hospital premises outside of standard visiting hours." I felt Sophia's hand slip into mine. Small, cold, steady. "You're saying she did something wrong," I said. "I'm saying," Hargrove replied, voice tightening just slightly, "that rules exist for a reason. No one mentioned the hand again, not the movement, not the timing, not the fact that something had happened in that room that didn't fit their version of reality. It was already being erased, rewritten, filed away under a safer explanation. I could see it happening in real time. "We're done here," Sheila said. That was it. Meeting over. Decision made. I didn't argue. Not there. I took Sophia's hand and walked out. In the elevator, the doors closed. And for a second, there was just the hum of cables and the sound of my own breathing trying to stay even. "Dad," she said quietly, looking up at me. "Yeah." His hand moved. I saw it. I looked down at her. I believed her. I believed her more than anything in that building. "I know," I said. She hesitated. "Then, why didn't they listen?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth wasn't something an 11-year-old should have to carry. Because the truth was, in a room full of degrees, money decides what matters. And people like us don't get to be right. I tightened my grip on her hand and said the only thing I could. They just missed it. But I didn't miss the way Patricia hesitated. I didn't miss that line in the chart. And I didn't miss the feeling sitting heavy in my chest as we walked out of that office. That something real had happened and they were going to bury it. I should have let it go. That's what a smart man would have done. Keep the job, keep my head down, stay invisible. People like me don't win fights like that, we survive them. That's the deal. Rent was due in 2 weeks. My bank account wasn't forgiving. Sophia needed food, school supplies, a life that didn't crack just because I made the wrong move. Walking away would have been easier, safer, but that line in the chart wouldn't leave me alone. Involuntary flexion, 2, 3 seconds. I kept replaying it. The timing, the way Sophia said it, the way the nurse hesitated. It didn't feel like nothing. It felt like the only real thing in that entire room. I stood in my kitchen that night, staring at the sink, hands still smelling faintly of disinfectant. And I knew one thing. If I walked away now, I'd be choosing their version of the truth. And I wasn't going to do that. 3 days after the incident, I went to see a neurologist who had nothing to do with Whitmore. No connections, no shared board, no quiet agreements behind closed doors. Dr. Arun Mehta. I found his name through a free clinic referral and sat in his waiting room for almost 2 hours without an appointment. I figured if I left, I wouldn't come back. And if I didn't come back, this would die right there. When he finally called me in, I told him everything. Not like a story, like a report, times, names, what was said, what wasn't said. He listened without interrupting. Didn't rush me, didn't check the clock. When I finished, he leaned back slightly, thinking. "A spinal reflex," he said slowly. "Doesn't require context, it doesn't care about timing, it just happens." I nodded. "But what you're describing, movement occurring immediately after direct contact, combined with a strong sensory stimulus." He paused. "That's different." "How different?" I asked. He looked at me. "That suggests cortical involvement." I didn't react. Not because I understood, but because I didn't want to interrupt. "It means," he continued, "there may be more brain activity than they're acknowledging." The room felt smaller. "Could they have missed that?" I asked. "They could have ignored it," he said. That hit harder. "Have they done any follow-up testing since the incident?" I already knew the answer. No. I'd asked around, quietly, carefully. No new EEG, no imaging, no reassessment, nothing. Dr. Mehta nodded once, like that confirmed something for him. "If what you're saying is accurate," he said, "then not reassessing after a potential response like that is a serious deviation. I didn't fully understand the medical language, but I understood this. Something happened in that room and they chose not to look at it. That night, I started writing things down, everything, dates, times, names, exact words when I could remember them. I didn't trust memory anymore, not when I just watched how easily facts could be reshaped in a single conversation. I photographed the bruise on Sophia's arm before it faded. 4 pictures, different angles, time-stamped. I saved them in a locked folder on my phone. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even Sophia. I just kept going. Getting through to the Whitmore family wasn't easy. Gerald Whitmore wasn't someone you just called, but there was another name on the contact list I'd seen once while cleaning an admin office. Claire Whitmore, his niece. I found a number attached to a foundation she was listed under. Called from a payphone outside the hospital. I didn't want anything traced back to me, not yet. When she picked up, her voice was calm, polished, distant. "My name is Daniel Reyes," I said. "I work at Whitmore Memorial. I need to tell you something about your uncle." Silence. Then, "Go ahead," I told her. "Everything. The room, Sophia, the mud, the hand." There was a pause when I finished, long enough that I thought she might hang up. "You're telling me," she said carefully, "that a child introduced soil?" And my uncle responded, "Yes, and the hospital has not conducted any follow-up." "No." Another pause, different this time, heavier. "Give me your number," she said. She called back 72 hours later. Her tone had changed, still controlled but sharper now. Focused. "I spoke to a neurologist," she said, "Dr. Rebecca Torres, Columbia. She specializes in disorders of consciousness." I didn't say anything. "She reviewed my uncle's publicly available records," Claire continued. "Do you know when his last comprehensive evaluation was? Number 2016, 6 years. I felt something tighten in my chest. "The standard protocol," she said, "is reassessment every 2 to 3 years. And they didn't know. Not missed, not delayed. Didn't." "Why?" I asked. There was a slight shift in her voice. "That," she said, "is what we're going to find out." That was the moment things stopped being just me. Stopped being a janitor with a notebook and a feeling he couldn't shake. Now there was someone else looking. Someone with access, resources, a reason to push. Over the next few weeks, things moved quietly but fast. Claire retained an attorney. Requests were filed, records demanded. The hospital didn't cooperate. Of course they didn't. They delayed, cited privacy laws, administrative review, procedures, all the right words, all the right walls, so the attorney went around them, filed a motion through the probate court overseeing the Whitmore estate, requested an independent neurological evaluation. Gerald Whitmore's legal team pushed back. Hard, but for the first time the system wasn't completely on one side. I kept writing, kept documenting, kept watching. Because I didn't know how this was going to end, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was buried in room 701 was starting to surface. They didn't come for me right away. That's how I knew it was planned. 2 weeks after Claire's attorney filed the motion, I got an email from HR, mandatory meeting, 9:00 a.m., daytime. They wanted me off my shift, out of my environment, out of anything familiar. When I walked into the office, there were 2 people waiting. Paul Freeman from HR and Sheila Voss, of course. They didn't offer me a seat. "Mr. Reyes," Paul started. Voice rehearsed. "After reviewing recent events, we've determined that you have violated patient confidentiality policies." I didn't say anything. "You disclosed information regarding a patient's condition to an external party," he continued. "That constitutes a breach under HIPAA guidelines." "I told a family member what I witnessed," I said. My voice stayed level. "That's not a medical record." Sheila stepped in before he could respond. "You shared information obtained through your position," she said. "That is protected." There it was. Clean, simple, wrong. Paul slid a paper across the desk. "Termination letter. Already printed. Already signed. You can sign this voluntarily," he said. "Or we proceed with a formal investigation. That process may impact your ability to secure future employment in healthcare. Not a threat, not officially, but close enough." I looked at the paper, then at him, then at Sheila. They expected hesitation, fear, maybe even gratitude that they weren't pushing further. My hands were steady when I pushed it back. "I'm not signing that." Silence, short, controlled. Sheila's expression didn't change. Then, we'll proceed accordingly, she said. I stood up. No shouting. No scene. They didn't deserve that. They didn't deserve anything from me. I stepped out into the parking lot with a folder I hadn't brought in. No job, no backup plan. Just the sound of traffic and the weight of what I'd just lost. My phone buzzed before I even reached my car. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Reyes, a voice said. Yes, this is David Chen. I represent Claire Whitmore. I leaned against the side of my car. Eyes closing for a second. They fired you, he said. Yeah, good, he replied. I opened my eyes. Good, I repeated. It means they're worried, he said. And worried people make mistakes. A pause. Then, I'd like to help you if you're willing to fight this. I looked out across the lot. At nothing, really. At everything. I am, I said. And just like that, this stopped being something I was trying to survive and turned into something I was going to take all the way through. The independent evaluation was approved on June 14th. 5 days later, they brought in their own team. Dr. Rebecca Torres didn't look like someone who wasted time. No small talk, no hesitation. She walked into that building like she already knew what she was about to find and just needed proof. They set everything up in Leonard Whitmore's room. Portable fMRI equipment, 3 technicians, controlled stimuli, structured tests. Dr. Hargrove was there. Gerald Whitmore showed up too for the first time in over a year, according to the staff, and Sheila Voss stood in the corner with 2 attorneys, everyone suddenly very interested. The test took 4 hours. No one said much afterward. They didn't need to. I was in my kitchen when the call came, cutting a sandwich for Sophia. Same way I always did, crusts off, diagonally. My phone rang. David Chen, I answered. Daniel, he said, voice tight, not nervous. Focused. Are you sitting down? I wasn't. I leaned against the counter. What happened? A pause. Then, he's conscious. The knife slipped slightly in my hand. Not fully, David continued, not in the way we are. But Dr. Torres's results show consistent, reproducible cortical responses. I didn't speak. When they gave him specific instructions, imagine playing tennis. Listening to familiar voices, his brain responded correctly. Patterned, intentional. I closed my eyes. He can follow commands, David said, which means he's been aware, at some level, for years. Years. The word didn't land all at once. It sank in slowly, like something heavy settling into place. They diagnosed it as cognitive motor dissociation, he continued, and according to Dr. Torres. Another pause. This could have been detected as early as 2018. 4 years. 4 years he could have been reached. 4 years no one checked. I slid down until I was sitting on the kitchen floor. Didn't even realize I'd done it. Daniel, David said more quietly now. This changes everything. He was right. Because this wasn't a strange incident anymore. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even negligence. This was something else. Something worse. A man had been trapped inside his own body, aware, while the people responsible for him never bothered to ask if he was still there. And the only person who noticed was my 11-year-old daughter. Things didn't explode all at once. They unraveled. Slow at first, quiet shifts behind closed doors, then faster. Like something that had been held together too long, finally giving way. After Dr. Torres's findings, Leonard's care changed immediately. New protocols, daily monitoring, structured communication tests. At first, it was small. Eye tracking, delayed blinks. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. It took patience, precision, time. But it was real. Within weeks, they had him responding consistently, and then words, short, broken, fragile, but words. The first time he spoke, I wasn't there, Claire told me later. She said his voice sounded like it had been buried for years, which, in a way, it had. His first word was, brother. His second was no. That was when the investigation shifted. From medical to something else. Something heavier. Detective Margaret Sullivan from Hartford PD took over the financial side. 19 years on the force. The kind of person who doesn't waste time asking questions she already knows the answers to. The Attorney General's office got involved soon after. Subpoenas went out. Emails got pulled. Records that hadn't been touched in years suddenly mattered. And what they found wasn't complicated. That's the part that stayed with me. It wasn't some genius plan. It was simple. And because it was simple, it worked. Gerald Whitmore had full control of his brother's estate. Every dollar, every decision. For 10 years, he paid himself a management salary, $1.2 million a year. No one questioned it. He redirected funds, quietly. Through shell companies, real estate holdings, investments that didn't exist on paper the way they should have. Over $40 million. Gone. And as long as Leonard stayed exactly where he was alive, but unreachable, nothing changed. No new will, no new oversight, no risk. But money wasn't enough on its own. That's where Dr. Hargrove came in. Emails recovered through court order showed a pattern. Gerald didn't just sign checks. He made requests, specific ones. Requests to limit aggressive intervention. Requests to avoid transferring Leonard to facilities with higher levels of neurological monitoring. Requests that sounded reasonable on paper. But when you read them together, they told a different story. One where Leonard wasn't just being cared for. He was being maintained, kept in a state that looked stable but never questioned. Dr. Hargrove complied, canceled a full reassessment scheduled in 2019, overruled a junior neurologist who recommended updated testing in 2020, buried that recommendation in administrative files. When investigators spoke to that Dr. Priya Kapoor, she said she'd been told the family didn't want further intervention. The family, not the patient. The hospital didn't push back. Maybe it was money. Maybe it was reputation. Maybe it was easier not to look too closely at a situation that kept funding coming in and questions out. Whatever the reason, they let it happen. Year after year. By September, the charges were filed. Gerald Whitmore 14 counts, embezzlement, fraud, criminal neglect, Dr. Hargrove medical negligence, obstruction. His license was suspended pending review. Sheila Voss resigned before they could make it official. The system that had protected itself so carefully started turning on itself just as fast. Patricia Langford, the nurse who wrote the chart note, cooperated. She told investigators she'd been pressured to minimize what she saw. That documentation creates liability, Hargrove had told her, so she almost erased it. Almost. That one line, 2 to 3 seconds, that's all it took. The security guard who grabbed Sophia was fired. I didn't press charges, I thought about it, but Sophia asked me not to. He was scared, she said. I didn't argue with her, because she was right. Fear makes people do things they don't think through. Fear makes systems protect themselves. Fear makes truth inconvenient. My case settled in October. I can't talk about the number, doesn't matter. What mattered was this: for the first time in years, I wasn't calculating every dollar before I spent it. For the first time, I could breathe without doing the math in my head. But more than that, the hospital was forced to change. New policies, mandatory reassessments, independent oversight. They named it the Whitmore Protocol. They wanted to name it after Sophia. I said no. She didn't do it for that. She didn't do it for anything. She saw someone who looked trapped and she tried to help. That's it. That's all. By the end of it, everything had shifted. Careers ended. Money exposed. Systems corrected. But none of that felt like the real ending. Because the real ending was still sitting in that room. Learning how to speak again. The settlement came quietly. No headlines, no press conference, just paperwork, signatures, and a number I wasn't allowed to repeat. But it changed everything, not just for me, for people like me. Whitmore Memorial was required to implement new protocols, real ones this time. Annual neurological reassessments, independent reviews, a patient advocacy system that didn't answer to the same people it was supposed to monitor. They called it the Whitmore Protocol, a name built on 10 years of silence. And one moment, that broke it. For me, it meant something simpler. Stability. I didn't have to choose between rent and food anymore. Didn't have to work double shifts just to stay even. For the first time since my wife died, I wasn't just surviving. I was standing still long enough to breathe. We met him in February, a Sunday afternoon. The private wing didn't feel the same anymore. It used to feel sealed off, like something hidden behind glass. Now, it felt lived in. There were flowers by the window, a television on low volume, books stacked on a shelf like someone actually planned to read them. Leonard Whitmore was sitting up in bed, propped against pillows, thinner than I expected. Not just physically, like time had carved something out of him and left only what couldn't be taken, but his eyes. His eyes were awake, sharp, focused, present. A speech therapist stood nearby. Claire was by the window. I stayed back, just inside the doorway. Sophia walked in first, same way she had the first time. Straight to the foot of the bed. Only this time, her hands were clean. Leonard looked at her for a long moment, like he was trying to place something he already knew. Then he spoke. His voice was rough, uneven. Each word pushed out like it had to fight its way free. "You talk to me?" Sophia nodded. A pause. He swallowed, breath catching slightly. "No one," he continued. Slower this time. "No one talked to me. For 10 years. The room went quiet. They talked about me," he said. "Around me. Never to me." Sophia didn't move. "You said I must be lonely," he added. She tilted her head slightly. "You looked lonely," she said. Simple. No hesitation. Just true. Leonard closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, they were wet. "The dirt," he said. "Why?" Sophia glanced back at me. I gave her a small nod. She turned back to him. "My grandma used to say," she began, voice soft but steady, "that the earth remembers us." Leonard watched her closely. "Even when people forget," she added. "She said if someone is lost, the earth can help call them back." A silence followed. Not empty. Full. Heavy in a way that pressed against your chest. Leonard's hand trembled slightly against the blanket. Then just one tear slipped down the side of his face. "I heard you," he said, barely above a whisper. "I was there." Sophia stepped a little closer. "Not afraid, never afraid." "I know," she said, and for a moment nothing else in that room mattered. Not the machines, not the lawsuits, not the money. Just a man who had been invisible for 10 years and a child who refused to treat him that way. Sometimes I think about how close this came to never happening. If the storm hadn't hit that day, if the rain hadn't turned the ground to mud, if Sophia hadn't cut across that back lot, if the stairwell door had latched the way it was supposed to, if the nurse hadn't stepped out, if that room had stayed closed, if just one thing had gone differently, Leonard Whitmore might still be lying there. Awake. Alone. Listening to a world that decided he wasn't in it anymore. I've spent a lot of time thinking about systems since then. Medicine, money, law. All of them were there. All of them had resources, expertise, authority, and all of them missed him, or chose not to see. I'm not educated in the way those people are. I don't read scans, I don't publish papers, I clean floors, but I know what it looks like when someone is treated like they don't matter. And I know what it means when someone decides they do. My daughter didn't have training, she didn't have permission, she didn't have anything that room respected. She just walked in, looked at a man everyone else had stopped seeing, and treated him like a person. That's all. That's what reached him. Not the machines, not the money, not 10 years of expertise, just a child who refused to forget that he was still there. People ask me sometimes what I think saved him. I don't give them a long answer. I just tell them the truth. The earth remembers us, even when everyone else forgets. This story is created by Fish Tells Stories for entertainment purposes only. Please do not attempt to recreate or imitate any actions shown.